Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to day two of our May PhD Career Conference. This session is called How to Write a Resume, and I'm Dr. Diane Sepakishi, and I will be leading us through the session today. Joining me kind of in the background, and you'll see her a little bit later, is Dr. Marian Wood, our CEO and director. She's hosting me today, and part of those duties are keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So if you do have a question, put it in the Q&A. We'll be able to keep track of them a little bit better, and we may have some time at the end of the session to answer a couple of those questions that went through. But today, how to write a resume. What are we going to be covering in our session today? The first thing that I want to do is go over the difference between CVs and resumes, paying particular attention to audience and purpose. Oftentimes, PhDs think these documents are interchangeable or that you can simply take a CV and convert it into a resume, but that's not the case. And that's because of the audience these documents are for and the goals of these documents and how you'll want to write them. So I want to go through that first because understanding the audience and purpose of a document you want to write can then help you write an effective document. So once we've got audience and purpose outlined, we're going to go through the sections of a resume. So I'll go through an overview of the sections and what you'll want to think about including. And then we'll go through some resume writing tips. So some help for writing in particular the work experience section of your resume and being able to speak about the experiences you've had over the course of your PhD or in your postdoc, and in language of industry, and then also some overall general resume writing tips for how to make your document really clean and easy to understand. So first section, CVs versus resumes, audience and purpose. Oftentimes, PhDs assume that CVs and resumes are interchangeable documents, but they are not. So let's go over the key differences. First, the audience. So for a CV, your audience is the search committee who is looking to hire for this faculty position. And it's also you. So your CV is a list of all of your accomplishments, everything that you've ever done in academia. So you want to have it all there. So that's why it's oftentimes, a bit of a document for you as well, so that you can have that full list as well. And important to note here, you and the search committee are both coming from the same industry and from the same general career field, right? From academia. So it's very easy for you to write a document listing everything that you've ever done and for the search committee to understand that document, right? They know what it means to be a graduate student. They know what it means to be a teaching assistant. They are familiar with all of these words and all of this language to describe what you did. The other thing is that whether you apply to, University A or University B, your CV largely stays the same, right? Both want to see that full list of everything that you have ever done. So it doesn't necessarily change too much between these applications. You might make tweaks here and there, but in general, all of what you're including is going to be the same. Now that's different from a resume. So for a resume, your audience is the employer or the hiring manager. And they're going to be the employer or hiring manager for a very specific role in a very specific industry. So I'll use the example of an instructional designer. Company A might put out a job ad for an instructional designer, and company B might also put out a job ad for an instructional designer. But those roles might look completely different. The responsibilities that each would have, the skills that they need to have, the tools that they would use, just because they're completely different roles. And so your resume will look completely different for applying to each of those roles. So a resume does change for each role that you apply to. And you're really using the document as a piece of persuasive writing written for the employer or hiring manager to get them to see the value that you bring to this role and convince them that you're worth having an interview with. So that's kind of the difference there when we're thinking about the audience of each of these documents. And the reason why the resume again has to be tailored is because non-academic careers are not monolithic. They are highly specialized. So to be successful in applying to non-academic jobs, you will need to identify a particular career field and focus your job search because you need to be able to talk about what you can do in the language applicable to that specific career field and also to the specific industry or type of organization. Again, an instructional designer, they could work at a university, they could work at a bank, they could work at another private institution, they could work at a nonprofit. And that role and what's required of them is going to look very different. So that's why we often speak about, focusing your job search because when it comes to writing your documents, they need to be tailored and they need to be tailored to that specific role. I also want to have a look at the content and the goal or purpose of a CV versus a resume. So the CV, as mentioned, it's going to include or list all of your accomplishments in your research, your teaching, your service, everything in academia. And the goal here is to demonstrate prestige, right? You want to demonstrate to the search committee that you have worked with, top people in your field, that you have published papers in a number of different journal articles, that you have studied at an institution that is really highly regarded in your field. That's what you're aiming to show with your CV and listing all of these things that you have done. Now, a resume is going to contain a list of your work history, key skills, and education, but it doesn't include everything that you've ever done. It's very tailored to the specific role that you have applied to. And the goal of the resume is to demonstrate that you have specific skills and that you've been able to use them with success in a variety of different work environments. So a little bit different there, right? Now remember, a resume by itself will not get you a job. What it can do is get you an interview. That's why it needs to be tailored to each job because you're trying to convince that particular employer, that particular hiring manager that you are worth that phone call and worth talking to further. And importantly, the resume should not be the sole focus of your job search. So it is but one part of the job search process. And I want to just kind of situate it within all of the components of finding a job. So a job search is more than just submitting resumes to an online job posting. There are other important aspects of the job search that are really going to help you succeed, particularly in a really competitive job market that we find ourselves in right now and in the economy that we find ourselves in right now. So the first part of a job search is actually to connect. You'll want to learn about companies and opportunities by connecting with people at organizations of interest. You'll then want to identify through your network, LinkedIn, and on-campus resources, identify possible positions that align with your career goals. So you really want to have a focus and you actually want to pick one specific career field that you want to focus your job search on. And then you'd apply. And that's where the resume would come into play because you'll want to write a resume tailored to specific positions. And I put here that you want to have multiple resumes in the sense that you'll want to have a resume designed for the career field you want to go into, instructional design, but then you'll want to have various resumes depending on the different instructional design jobs that you apply to. Because remember, it has to be tailored to the specific job ad. And then if you're successful, you'll be invited for an interview. And it's there where you will have the opportunity to highlight your qualifications during in-person interviews and skills assessments. So what I wanted to kind of show visually with this slide as well is that those connect and identify steps make up a large proportion of your job search process. And the part where you're applying and doing interviews actually makes up quite a small component of finding a job. So that networking, that making connections, that building relationships, that researching actually makes up a large proportion of your job search. And I won't go into that further today because tomorrow I'll be doing a whole session just on networking. So be sure and come back for that. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how the resume fits into the larger job search. So with an idea of who we're writing for and what the goal is of this document, I now want to go through the sections of a resume. how a resume is structured and what to include in each section. And as I mentioned just before we got started, I'm going to go through this rather quickly. So I do encourage you to visit our Finding and Applying to Jobs module within the Beyond the Professoriate platform for a full set of lessons to help you work through each of the steps that I'm going to kind of be talking about today in further detail. So as a general overview of the sections of your resume, I'll give you kind of the list and then we'll go into more details for each section. So you're going to have your contact information at the very top of your resume, then a professional summary, a key skills section, then a relevant work experience section, which will make up kind of the bulk of your resume. And then your education actually goes at the end of your resume. So also a big difference between a CV and a resume. So first, your contact information. So this is really important to have because this will ensure that an employer or hiring manager can get in touch with you should they want to book you for that interview. So you want to make sure to have your full name. Some people like to include their pronouns on their resume. So for me, that would be Diane Sepakishi, brackets she, her. I put street or mailing address here. This is not as critical information to include because it's likely that employers will try to reach you in other ways. But some folks still include a street and mailing address. But it's your email address and your phone number that you're really going to want to make sure are included on that resume and are correct. You also want to make sure that, your inbox isn't full and you can still receive email messages. You also want to ensure that you have some kind of answering machine message on your phone so that if you're not there to pick up when they call, they can leave a message for you. And then depending on the career field, a link to a portfolio or sample work might be appropriate. Not everyone needs this. This is a great question for people in your network who work in the career field that you're interested in moving into. Is this common? Should I have this ready to go? Is this something that employers are expecting and that I should include? So following your contact information, you have your professional summary section. So what is this exactly? This is a section where you'll want to include about 2 to 3 sentences that contains a description of your most relevant work experience as well as your relevant skills. So it's almost like a little snapshot of your resume, and the employer can read further to get more details about what you've mentioned in this professional summary section. And you'll want to make sure in this section, but also in the rest of your resume, to use terminology of the job or career field that you are applying to. That just makes it really easy for the employer or hiring manager to really understand the value that you bring to a role. So kind of along that lines, things to exclude from your professional summary, not have in there, your subject matter expertise, unless it is very relevant to the job you're applying to. Your PhD, that goes in your education section in another section of your resume. And your publications, again, unless they are directly relevant to the job you are applying to. So we're trying to focus here on skills and experiences that are very applicable to industry and, not including some of those details from academia that would be more appropriate for academia. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples. So this PhD has a PhD in education and looking to move, to work with some of those companies that develop LMS or ed tech solutions. So here's their professional summary. I provide insight into current technology trends and research and how they can be leveraged to enhance learning and instruction. I have a passion for education, people, and learning, which has given me over 8 years of diverse experiences, including instructional design, education consulting, and e-learning development. So just a couple of sections here, but some indication of some skills that they have, as well as some experiences that they've had as well. And one more example, this is a physics PhD who's works in data science. So their professional summary looks something like this. Physicist with strong background in solving complex problems using theoretical, numerical, and computational methods taken from physics, math, and data science. extensive experience using data analysis and modeling techniques to find creative solutions to research questions. Strong ability to collaborate in person and remotely with scientists from other fields. Skilled at learning new techniques, languages, and software quickly and efficiently to provide immediate value to a team. So again, indicating some of their key skills, but also some of their experiences as well. And we're not getting lost. There's no physics jargon. There's nothing here about what they studied over the course of their PhD. They're focused very much on those skills that are directly related to the work that they want to do next in industry. All right, so after the professional summary, you can have a section on your resume, your skills section. And this is where you would list 3 to 4 top relevant skills in bullet point format. So this is, again, a place where you can really highlight the relevant skills that you have for the position that was posted to catch the employer or hiring manager's eye and encourage them to read further about, how you've developed these skills or how you've used these skills before. Importantly, in your list, you'll want to include technical skills, but also interpersonal skills and personal qualities. And I'll talk about those in the next slide. And these skills that you list, make sure that they are emphasized and expanded upon in your work experience section. So the employer gets a sense of not only you have these skills, but how you've actually used these skills successfully. So we mentioned skills. What do we mean by skills? Oftentimes, when PhDs think, okay, I've got to list my skills, they think of the technical skills, right? The skills that are acquired through training, the skills that generally you show you have through tangible evidence, such as a degree or certification. So things like analytical reasoning, languages, research and reporting, or editing and copy editing. But I mentioned you also want to include some interpersonal skills and personal qualities. So by interpersonal skills, I mean behaviors and traits used to interact with and communicate with others. Things such as communication, problem solving, time management, and collaboration. And also personal qualities. So these are characteristics you have that inform how you approach your work. So things like being a great team player, really creative, someone who takes initiative, or someone who's really inclusive. So you want to have, a wide variety of skills. Employers value these interpersonal skills and personal qualities as much as, if not more than, the technical skills, because they are looking for someone who can join their team, work well with others, and come help them accomplish their goals. So after a skills summary comes the relevant work experience section. So this is where you would list different job titles that you've held, and you'd have bullet points under each of those job titles to describe what you did and how you used skills successfully. So I'm going to save details about this section for a couple of slides from now when we talk about more of the writing and how to translate some of your experience. So more to come on this section. And then at the end of your resume is your education section. So comes last on a resume. You want to list your education in chronological reverse order. So your most recent degree earned will be at the top of the list. You'll want to indicate the school where you earned the degree. Put the town in brackets if it's not obvious where the school is located, the degree you earned, and the field of study. And include the date if it's within 5 years. All right, so let's move on to some resume writing tips. In particular, I want to go through a little bit on how to talk about and translate your experience from academia in your resume. So remember, a CV is a list of all of your accomplishments. A resume, what it does is it shows how you accomplished those achievements. So if we take, for example, a paper that you published in a really prestigious journal, right? A CV, you would just list that paper and where it was published. You'd list the citation. In a resume, just simply listing the paper doesn't actually tell the employer or hiring manager how you achieved that end outcome, because there was a lot of work involved in getting to that end outcome. And this employer might not fully understand everything that was involved or fully understand what was involved and how it relates to what they need to have done within their organization. So that's why you need to do a little bit of translation a little bit of rewording everything that you've done so that it can be really appreciated, valued, understood by folks who are outside of academia. So a resume provides the initial evidence to an employer that you have applied your skills with success in a work environment. But you need to be able to effectively communicate that. You need to talk about how you've used those skills with success. So there are two methods that I'm going to introduce you to here. Again, we have many more details in the lessons in the platform to help you with these. But the first kind of method, strategy, they are star stories. So the star story format prompts you to really reflect on your experiences and create compelling narratives about what you did, and most importantly, how you did it. So this format will help you articulate what skills you use to successfully accomplish a task. Now, star stories don't directly go on a resume, and I'll talk about how they are still useful for resume writing. But star stories are an excellent method for structuring answers to behavioral interview questions. So they are definitely worth writing out and creating, your own star story library per se, a bunch of different examples. They do help you write impact statements. So it's important to first kind of take stock of situations where you had to use a skill to solve a problem or reach an end outcome. It's great to have a whole bunch of examples of how you've done that. And then you'll use these star stories to help you write what's called impact statements. Now, impact statements are what you find on a resume. Those are those bullet points under each job title. So they include a short description of what you did in that role, but then each bullet point begins with an action verb to show how you use different skills with success. And because you're communicating what you did and how you did it, right, you're providing evidence. It's very helpful here to be very specific and to quantify when you can, because that just really helps to, give an idea of the impact that you've had. So let's go over star stories in a little bit more detail. So star stories are a narrative structure that includes a targeted beginning, a short explanatory middle, and a strong ending that illustrates clearly what you can do for an employer, right? And they really want to emphasize here your skills and what you've accomplished by using those skills. So STAR, S-T-A-R, is an acronym. The S stands for situation, where you will define the context. The T stands for task, where you identify the key objective. The A stands for action. What did you do? And you want to really emphasize a skill you used. And then the R stands for result. Summarize the outcome in business terms. So again, it's helpful to create kind of a library or a composite of a whole bunch of different star stories that really shows how you used a number of different skills successfully. So I want to give you a couple of examples of star stories and then how we took those star stories and wrote impact statements. So we'll start with a star story. So that means thinking first of a situation. So think of a specific time you used a relevant skill or solved a problem. And my example here is the department that I worked in hosted a group of local high school students for an afternoon to teach them about the research being done on campus. Now, what was the task? You want to think of a specific issue, obstacle, or problem you had to solve. So for this example, I volunteered as a group lead tasked with creating a 25-minute interactive presentation that showcased the research in an accessible way for the target audience. What was the action? Think of the actions you took to address this problem. Well, I worked with a team of grad students to design and share an engaging presentation to the high school students using appropriate language and visual displays. And then what was the result? What were the outcomes of the action you took? What was the success that you had by using your skills? And so the result here was that they did evaluations of the day, and overall evaluation scores for the event were increased 20% from the previous year, with our group's presentation ranking the highest for the day. Now, I wanted to use this example because we often take for granted that we have to communicate a lot of what we do to audiences that are not directly within our field. And this is actually a really important skill that employers look for, because a lot of the time you might be working on projects and you're working with team members who come from another department in the organization. Or you want to be able to describe, what you've learned and what you've researched or what you've done as part of your work team to a client who is, completely outside of, what you've been working on. They just want to know the impact or what they need to do next or what solution you're going to put into place. And so, don't discount some of these really important communication skills, interpersonal skills that you've developed over the course of your degree or postdoc. So then how do we take this STAR story and create impact statements? What is that going to look like? So I've got the example here. On your resume, you'll have your heading with professional work experience. You'll have the location where this experience was held. So the example here is Rice University, Houston, Texas. A date. So this experience was from April 2025. And then you'll have your job title. So my job title here is Group Lead for the Research With Us Campus Day. Then, usually under the job title, I include a short descriptive sentence. This is often like setting the situation, like setting the context for your impact statements. So what I've got here is created an interactive presentation showcasing our department's research. And then I've got the impact statements. So let me read them to you, and then I'll talk about them and describe them in a little bit more detail. But we've got worked with a team of 3 to conceptualize a 25-minute interactive presentation for a group of local high school students. Created the visual presentation with embedded activities to encourage active learning of participants. Designed handouts using language and diagrams appropriate for the target audience. Coordinated with team members to deliver a seamless presentation using Microsoft PowerPoint in the time allotted. And then overall evaluation scores for the event were increased by 20% from the previous year, with our group's presentation ranking the highest for the day. So in my impact statements, I've tried to make sure to highlight a variety of different skills. So some technical skills like creating visual presentations, designing handouts, being able to use tools like Microsoft PowerPoint, but also some of those interpersonal skills, right? Being able to work with a team, coordinating with the team, creating a presentation for an allotted time period. So I have really good time management skills, those kinds of things. So those are the impact statements generated from that STAR story. And I just want to go through one more example. This one was kind of taken from my own experience. So I have a PhD in kinesiology and health sciences and have moved into more of a project management business manager role. So I wanted to include an example here of how I can take an experience from my time in a laboratory setting and make that very relevant to a project management position. So the situation here is the primary investigator wanted to initiate a new project to study the effects of cold exposure on fat and muscle metabolism. What was the task? Well, as the senior lab manager, I was required to set a schedule, determine equipment needs, coordinate assistance from partners, and identify important collection data points. What was the action that I took? Well, I created a project outline with important dates, tasks, and assignments. I monitored the progress of the project, making adjustments as needed to reach objectives. And what was the outcome? Well, the project was completed on time and on budget, and the results of the study helped secure an additional $40,000 grant for the lab for future work. So how would I take this STAR story and create impact statements? Again, I'm just showing kind of a brief layout of a resume here. I have professional experience. The experience was held at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, from January 2025 to August 2025. Now, the job title that I put here is Senior Lab Manager. So I'm going to take a moment to explain this a little bit. I was not technically a senior lab manager. I was a graduate student. But for those in project management, graduate student doesn't really say a lot. In fact, it actually makes it seem like I was, more of a student rather than the fact that I was, the most senior graduate student and in fact had to take more of a leadership role in this case when designing these new studies. So what I decided to do is to modify my job title to align it more with industry and so that an employer or hiring manager reading it could get a better immediate sense of, the importance of the role that I held. So I've modified it into the language of industry, but also modified it to really reflect what my responsibilities were. There are no, graduate students aren't called senior lab managers in academia, but that is the role that I had while I was there. So that's why I chose to modify that job title. And underneath that job title, I've got, a brief description of the situation, setting the context for the impact statements. I've got manage the planning, execution, and monitoring of a multi-week study. And then I've included my impact statements. So I'll read them and then we can talk about them further. So I've got communicated with project lead to identify all of the project objectives, created a project outline with important dates, tasks that needed to be completed, and who was assigned to each task, delegated task to project associates, monitored progress of the project regularly, making any adjustments as needed to reach objectives, completed the project on time and on budget, and the results of the study were included in a successful grant application for additional funding of $40,000. So what I've done here is made sure to include both technical skills related to project management and interpersonal skills. So things like created a project outline, monitoring the progress of the project, more technical skills related to the project management field. But then I've also got, I communicated, I delegated, worked with others. Something else that I will mention is that I really worked hard to speak about my experience in the language of the project management industry. So you'll notice that I communicated with project leads. So I didn't call the person the primary investigator as I would in academia. I call them the project lead. I delegated tasks to project associates. So again, I didn't say my fellow graduate students. I called them project associates because they were people that I was working with on this project. Things like planning, execution, and monitoring of projects, those are words taken directly from the project management industry. And I also kind of removed any reference to my study in terms of the science. So there's nothing about the subject I used, the method of analysis, the different tools that I had to use. That's all kind of been removed because those details aren't important to a project manager or to the field that I want to move into. So they're all really important to academia and to getting the work done. But when I want to speak about the specific project management skills, I don't want them to get lost in, unneeded scientific jargon. So couple of things I did there to really work on translating what I did in the lab to this new field that I wanted to move into. And again, we've got lessons in the platform to help you work through those steps because it is a bit of a, a step-by-step process in terms of first figuring out, okay, how do I even start talking about what I did in language that's more aligned with industry than academia. And then the whole, okay, now I've got to write some star stories and then write these impact statements. So there's a lot of steps involved, and that's why we created all those video lessons to help you move through those steps. So just a couple of pointers for the experience section. Remember, you're including prior work experience that's relevant to the job that you're looking to apply to. Doesn't have to come from the same industry, but it has to be relevant experience. You want to include your items in chronological reverse order. So again, the most recent experience first. Include summaries of each position that kind of highlight your responsibilities, set the stage for your impact statements, and then use those impact statements to demonstrate your skills and experience and how you've used them to achieve a successful outcome and use the language of the industry. So I just wanted to provide some overall best practices for your resume. It should be 1 to 2 pages. And again, oftentimes PhDs look at their CV and how extensive it is and wonder, well, how am I going to get all that information down into 1 to 2 pages? And if you're following the advice that we're giving and making sure to only include like relevant information to the job that you are applying to, making sure to very carefully curate your experience to what you'd like to do next, it's much easier to get that document down to 1 to 2 pages. You also want to make it something that's easy to skim or read quickly. An employer or hiring manager, might take 6 to 10 seconds to read over a resume. And if it's already really hard to read, if it's really cluttered, if you try to just squeeze everything in by using a really tiny font, that's not easy to read. It's not easy to find the information that they're looking for. And you might get passed over simply because your resume is not easy to follow. So make sure that it's easy to skim. Use keywords and industry language so that, again, it's really easy for the employer to understand what you did and the value that you can bring to them and to this new role. And, keep it a simple, consistent format, right? Consistent headings. Everything is aligned where it needs to be aligned, and there's lots of white space. I think something great to do here is to, draft your resume and bring it to friends or family. And they don't even need to be really familiar with your field or where you want to move next, but just ask them, like, is this clear? Is this something that you would, feel at ease and comfortable reading? Or does it look too cluttered and it's hard to find information, right? So that's some really great feedback to get from folks who don't even have to be in your field. Now, the last slide I want to present here is just briefly speak to AI and its use in writing your documents. We do have a lesson about this in the platform, but I know that, AI is a tool that is out there, and oftentimes we're wondering, well, how can I use it to help me with this task of writing a resume? So I wanted to put in some kind of key pointers or ways that AI could help you, and then I want to direct you to that lesson for more information. AI can certainly help you summarize a job ad, maybe help you identify the most relevant skills or the skills that are talked about the most in this job ad that you really want to make sure that you are emphasizing in your own application document. Could help you align language with the job ad, maybe find synonyms for words that are most applicable to a specific industry. Certainly could help you format a resume, perhaps provide you with, a template or an example template that you can use. But I'm going to caution you here, do not have AI write your resume, right? Don't throw in a job ad and your CV into an AI tool and have it generate a resume for you. You need to do that work yourself. AI is going to, cause errors. It's probably going to invent things or experiences, skills that you don't actually have with, examples that you haven't actually done before. And this process of translating what you did into the language of a new industry, is pretty individual and unique work that you need to do, and you need to write yourself to make sure that it's accurate and accurately reflects how you can, how you can translate and take all the nuance from what you did in academia to industry. Now, I know that there may be some folks who are, mainly just concerned about, spelling errors or making sure everything's grammatically correct, particularly if English is an additional language for you. And certainly AI could help, catch some of those errors. I would just prompt the AI tool to look for those spelling errors, to maybe highlight them, but not to change any of the content of the resume that you've written, so that you know that the content is accurate, and then you can use this tools to help you just finesse it and make sure that the document you're presenting is free of errors and grammatical mistakes. So that's where I'll leave it there with AI. I encourage you again to check out the other lessons that we have. We've got how to use AI when writing resumes and cover letters. So definitely check that out because it goes into, all the considerations that you want to make sure you take into account before you use these tools to help you. But with that, I will stop share and see if there are any questions that we might want to answer here at the end. 61.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I should have muted myself. I hope that wasn't too clanky when I've been typing. Was that
No,
too? Okay.
no.
Yes, I've answered 24
Okay.
of the open 63, and there are more coming in, and I have not even attempted the chat. So, a couple of things that I just want to say before we get into some of the questions that I flagged. Almost all the questions that you have about translating, identifying the language to of employers, and modifying resumes, all of those are actually in the platform. So I'm actually just going to grab this here because I just want to reiterate what Diana said, but just we're here in step three. Under the implementation stage. But if you're actually just trying to figure out the language of industry and the language of employers, you actually want to go over here to step two. And so step two here is like identifying professional career options. That's a great place for you to spend some time. We also have a video here under what are your marketable skills. And so some of you might need to actually go back to step one. The way that we've designed the PhD career training platform is to walk you through this process and so if you're having trouble answering some of these questions of like, what's the industry? What are the key skills this industry wants? Does my industry want a resume or do I need to utilize a CV? Then you actually should, I highly recommend go back to the beginning and go through some of these earlier lessons because a lot of you are not ready to write resumes yet based on your question, which is fine. A lot of times when we think about applying for jobs, we think, well, we need to write a resume. But there's actually a lot more work that goes into researching career options, understanding the language of employers, and identifying your marketable skills before you can sit down and write a resume. So if you've got some of these earlier questions, take a look, spend some time in the career training platform. I'd say like 10 minutes, and then just start flagging and bookmarking some of these videos that align with some of the questions that you have, and then come back, next week or over the next couple of weeks and complete those lessons, and then go to some of this resume writing content that we're talking about today. So a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Diane, and I know we're almost at time, actually had to do with AI.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I know that a lot of what you're get, a lot of the answers is actually going to be networking. Let me see where these questions, the Q and A's went to. And that's another thing too. If you wait, I've got too many screens.
Mhm.
If the answer that I gave you was like, this is a good question for your network and you don't have a network, then that's also something that you need to be working on before you're writing resumes is getting a professional community together. But where do I see the answer live one? Answer live. Oh, is there not like an easy way to see these?
I
Darn
think you
it.
have to go through them if you flag them and see which ones you flagged.
This is why I don't do the, okay, that's not really helpful. Some of the questions that we had around AI was really about getting your resume read, like through the AI scanning software, or
Oh,
companies
yes.
are using
Okay.
AI in order to go through, kick out resumes. There's also
Yep.
some concerns that AI is making it more difficult for people to stand out. Like you said, I can say that I'm really passionate about of something, or I can use my star statements, but I'm going to sound like everybody else. So, what are some advices that you have for PhDs and postdocs that are trying to navigate this new hiring market where companies are using AI to scan documents?
Yeah, for sure. We get that question a lot, but even more so now that it seems to be much more prevalent. Um, and I would say it comes down to networking, right? You need to find a way to get around these robots and these scanning tools that, maybe sifting through, hundreds, if not thousands of applications, find the first couple that fit the criteria and only pass those along. So networking helps you kind of get around that in the sense that you are building relationships and connections with people, and using those connections to then get your resume like directly in the hands of the hiring manager. So for example, having a connection with someone, seeing that their company posted a job, yes, you might still have to submit your resume through their portal because that's how their system works. But that connection of yours can talk to the hiring manager and say, listen, I've got this really great person that I've talked to a couple of times. I think they'd be a really great match. Go look for their resume in the pile of resumes that were submitted and have a look and see if it does indeed, match the criteria. And that's a way of working around and getting your resume actually read and seen in the giant pile that might be submitted. And then it's less about worrying about specific keywords or how you're going to get through the system and really just having that personal connection help get it directly to the person that it needs to actually get to.
Yeah, because companies are using AI because they're just being inundated, like Diane said. And so they don't want to sift through all of the resumes. They really are looking for recommendations and referrals. Companies are using recruiters and employee referrals way more than they ever did in the past. So if you're just submitting resumes to companies, and you don't know anybody over there, then you're going to be like literally one of like 1,000 people who are just going to get filtered out by AI because the companies are just so overwhelmed and they can't tell bots from a person. It's a real problem for companies and it's a real problem for job seekers. The last question, because this comes up every time you do this presentation, and I love the presentation. I love your example. A lot of people are freaked out about changing their job titles. So I have my 2 cents, but I'm going to add it after you reiterate or advice. So if you're going
Yeah.
to rename yourself, what's the process? And I know you talked about it in the video, but just reiterate, what is the process by which you make that decision? And how do you what is the process that you do for creating a title for yourself?
Yeah, so read up on the industry that you're moving into, get a sense of the wording or kind of job titles of people that are in that industry, and a sense of what those job titles mean and some experiences that they've had, right? You can look on LinkedIn, look what kind of job titles people have, what kinds of things they've listed as their experience under that job title, and see if it matches a lot of what you did. A lot of these job titles, they're not regulated. Like there's no like credential that comes with being a senior lab manager. So it's not like someone can go into a system, look it up, and discover that I've fraudulently called myself something that I'm not. I based it on the experience that I had and what I actually did, and how that aligned with how someone in industry might see me. And I
Yeah.
really used it as a way to just show that I was more than just a student. Like student to everyone else is, someone who's learning, someone who has other people that they're reporting to, someone who's just being told what to do and just doing that job
Or
rather
you're
than the
just reading a
fact,
book.
or you're just
You're not
reading
even
a book,
working, right? Like you're
doing
writing
tests.
exams. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Yep.
And I did so much more than that as,
Yeah.
a senior graduate student in that position. So I really
Yeah.
just wanted to show, really just automatically share that value right off the bat. And then they could read my bullet points and,
Yeah.
make that conclusion for themselves.
It's the difference between like an HR title and like an industry it's and what you do, right? And so I guess that's also my recommendation for people is like Diane didn't call herself like senior research scientist, right? Or vice provost. Like she wasn't elevating herself into some sort of position that she didn't actually have. So that's where you want to be careful, right? Like don't lie about who you were or your responsibilities or what you did, but be descriptive. And so that's what we're trying to actually get you to do is be more descriptive instead of just using that like graduate student title that is just an HR title. It doesn't capture what you do. So one of the recommendations I have for humanities social scientists too, like if you're a graduate teaching assistant, you can just call yourself a university researcher or a university educator because you're a researcher and you're an educator. And that actually gives you some flexibility then to break out some of those bullet points, even if that job title doesn't align for what you're applying for. It's not pigeonholing you into, well, you didn't do anything, you weren't working, you were just studying. As PhDs and postdocs, you have to demonstrate that your graduate education and training is work experience and that you have been doing something other than writing tests, right? And so that's really the struggle that we have is that we're given these titles within an academic system that makes sense, but they don't actually, but they minimize who we are and what we're doing, and can be a handicap when we're moving into a penalty when we're moving into an industry role. So there are now 79 open questions, not including whatever is in the chat. If we did not have a chance to answer your question, please feel free to email us at member@beyondprof.com. But first, please spend some time in the platform. All these questions that you're asking us, most of them either we have a video lesson on them, or once you watch the video lesson and you have some really specific questions that are industry specific, then we're going to probably direct you to building a network of people who can give you more insight information. Because applying for a job as a medical science liaison or a technical writer or a project manager are just different. And so there's just going to be a lot of nuances that we're not able to cover. So thank you so much, and come back tomorrow where Diane is going to talk all about networking. And then Thursday, it's LinkedIn and online tools with Dr.
Yeah.
Susan Jodry. And then I will be back on Friday to talk to the international students with some additional tips and strategies. So thank you so much for your time. And this was a great presentation. Thanks, Diane.
No problem. Bye, everyone.